getting involved with things. So that's kind of what a MakeFest looks like, but imagine that magnified over an entire library, and you'll get a feel for just how diverse and mixed it actually is. So it centers on makers, doesn't it?
Yeah. So who are the makers?
I mean, initially, you've actually got to have the people first. I mean, that's key.
Yeah.
Basically, you have to get the people and the makers, and then you worry about everything else after that.
Yeah. So, what's a maker? There's a growing community, and it's quite a vast community of people who specialise in doing hands-on creative skills and design or digital skills or making that are out there, that learn by doing. And a lot of them run to what's called like the maker ethos. They love to share what they do. And it's very, very inbuilt into the culture. So doing something and building something and then sharing how they did that. So there's quite a big culture of that. The Newcastle Life Sciences run a national maker fair that we've presented it several times, and there was a national movement for it. MakeFest we set up independently so that it wouldn't be within, so that it could be part of the library. So that's the first thing that we encountered.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to make. So the idea of getting a community of people who make things and share their ideas with people isn't necessarily new. It's been around for a while in America, maybe 10 years, 15 years more. They've been running maker fairs. That's a branded thing with their own logos and their own kind of style. And we do, as Kaz says, have a national one in the UK, Newcastle, every year. It's a big two-day event in a big venue there, not the library. But you have to pay for that. So you have to pay to get in, you have to pay for the branding to go with it, and have to follow a strict sense of guideline. We wanted this to be a free event for everybody and keep it free for everybody. So we took the decision to set up what's effectively an independent maker fair and call it MakeFest. So nobody pays to come to this. The makers don't pay to set up stalls. They don't pay to get in, and we don't pay for the venue. And there's no.
There you go. Right, okay.
And so there's no politics involved with that, and I think that's one of the strengths of running these kind of events in community spaces. So, should we move on to the next slide? I need to try and get there. Sorry, we're just trying to tinker with the thing. So, where do you find makers? Let's go back up again. Hold on a second. Yeah.
We've just had a request if you can speak a little closer to the microphone. Just
right, is that a bit better?
Yeah. Can everyone hear us? Well, we don't know, but
I'm assuming you can. Right, so let's just go back a little.
Let's go back. We're struggling a little bit with the controls here. Thank you, Ben.
There you go.
Okay, right, so okay. We're leaning in now. So you have to put up with our large profiles in order to hear us.
So yeah. So we've got So
okay.
We've got this moment where, what's the maker communities? They're built in things like hackerspaces, makerspaces, and fab labs. So they all hang out in these kinds of spaces. And if you have a quick nose at the next slide, there's this big thing, as I said, about the maker ethos. So people learn, they share. This is the Mark at Maker Fair with Mitch Altman and Jimmy, who are both very big in the US maker scene. And they come up and they run soldering classes and hands-on classes for kids. So, there's a big movement to share what you know. So they're keen to share. So first question, I think, for you guys that's really important is, why in a library?
Denise?
Well, in a library, because all of the ethos that has just been discussed absolutely matches the overall ethos of a library, that it's free, that it's a place to learn, and of course in the past and even obviously today, libraries are basically learning spaces, so it matches really, really well the idea and the sort of thinking ahead.
Yeah, there's two aspects to this really. I mean, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the practicalities of MakeFest for those you're thinking can't do that. But there's this issue of maker spaces as well. So in America kind of like taking the lead on things. They've started setting up maker spaces, so these community spaces with 3D printers, laser cutters, tech, resources, sewing machines, welding, whatever. You know, there are libraries in America now that have these things in, so people
this
can
is the map there that you can see is all the library maker
spaces in the US. So they're providing space for people to come and do these things. MakeFests are kind of like an extension of that, where people from outside that library community come in every year en masse and share all the other things that are going on. So there's two elements to that.
And obviously from there you can see, and Denise will tell you probably miles more about that than we will, you know, the Libraries Task Force has a current, quite big interest in maker spaces in libraries. So putting those spaces into libraries, so to have the community there that you can tap in, that you can then collaborate with and work with, to work on, these kinds of projects is important.
And essentially, this is about inclusion and about learning, which is what our business is, isn't it, as well?
Yeah. Next slide then, Belle. I think, Ethan, I think you're better controlling the slides than we are at this stage. So yeah, I think this carries on from what Denise was saying.
Well,
it's just we have a taskbar at the bottom here that's closing off the controls. So yeah, library maker spaces. There we go. Let's start with that one.
This is good. Stay there.
Right. So let's hold on with that one, Ethan. So the first thing you need to do if you want to set one of these up is actually just make the decision that you want to do it, and then we kind of figure out how you're going to go about doing that as we go along. So we're going to kind of give you some tips in the process that we went through to make this happen. And if you follow the same kind of ideas or are aware of these things, you should be able to end up with a MakeFest new thing. So I think the first thing that we did was to have a look at your space. It sounds like an obvious thing to do, but I was at Crew a few weeks back, and go around your space and look for the gaps between the shelving, look for the rooms that you have, and go there with a mentality of a 6 foot by 2 foot 6 table in mind. Now, some people have actually even cut out, I kid you not,
we cut out
a 6 foot by 2 foot 6 piece of card and take it around with you. It's a great way of working out how many pitches you can have in your space.
Yeah.
Because one thing we found in Liverpool was that there were certain areas where we could move things around to create space, and there were other areas where we couldn't do that, and we had to fit in around that space.
And we were quite keen to fit in around the books.
Yeah.
So we didn't go about saying, well, we'll move a whole bunch of books out of the way. What we did was fit our tables around these.
No, we've always insisted, actually, because it's an open library, that theoretically that there are no books that can't actually be accessed on the day. So even if we do move shelves around, the idea is that people can still reach a book. And I think that's quite crucial because, as you know, if a person comes in and they can't actually use the sort of core offer of the library service, it can cause a few problems and occasional complaints as well.
Yeah.
So if you're having a quick look at this slide here, how many pictures you can have, and there's the average size of a trestle table. This picture here I've just pulled, it's just a general library, it's not our library, mainly because I didn't want our library spawns up. But, when you have a look at it, one of the things we did do was we got our library's plans, and we looked very much in detail about how the library was positioned, what was the best way we could have wheelchair access, what was the best way in which we could have access for the books, and all the rules and regs regarding how much room people needed to come through so that we could position our tables.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember when you set up a MakeFest, you're not closing the building for the day and replacing it with a MakeFest. You're putting a MakeFest in around the existing things. And you do have to consider things like access around the tables.
And about wheelchair
access. So, my personal view, I don't think the others would agree, is it's much easier to actually go physically into a space and walk around that space with an idea of measurements, take a tape measure with you or a table fold out, rather than simply looking at plans. I think you spot nooks and crannies that you can squeeze something into. So the first advice, I think, is to figure out how many tables you can comfortably squeeze in. Don't worry at that point about how you're going to get power to them.
We'll talk about
that later. At the moment, it's just about how many can you fit in. That way you've got an idea, and I think maybe the next slide would be useful now.
Yeah.
How many people that you can try to get in. So
in there.
Thank you for that. So once you have an idea that we can fit in 20, 30, 40 tables max,
or more,
or
depending
more,
on the size of your library.
you then start putting out a call to your makers.
Now, there's various ways that you can get in touch with makers. You know, first thing is find your local makerspace. You know, there is a national map on
It's on
we'll
the screen.
give some links, to Ethan to put out to you about where your makerspace is. So that map there just picks all of our current makerspaces. I think actually that needs updating. We've probably got a lot more now.
Yeah.
And what you can do is you can, you know, go and find your local makerspace and say to them, right, we want to do a MakeFest. Would it be something that you'd be interested in? You'll find no doubt that they'll want to help you. And also we set up a WordPress site as makers to help, you know, and then get involved in the maker community.
Yeah, I think that's important. So there's only so much you can do remotely. So you can Google things and you can search for makers and so on, but it is very much community, and you'll find it will take you a little bit of time to get to know who's who in your local community. So send out those emails, make phone calls, find where the makerspaces are. Better still, ring them, go and see them, talk to individual people. And what you'll find is they will say, well, you need to speak to so-and-so, you need to speak to so-and-so, and build that network. That's the next important thing. And you decide on your MakeFest first, and then you decide how you're going to fill those pitches by putting your call out to makers. So in the first instance, it's a two-part thing. You do a lot of behind-the-scenes phone calls, emails, going to visit people, talking to people, that charm offensive, before you literally then hand over to putting a call out on social media to fill the remainder of those spaces. So that's quite crucial to do. I think,
to be honest, to some extent, when you do them first kind of runs where you go and visit makers and see makers and get to talk to makers, one of the best things to do is work out who your key makers are in the community. And then, to be honest, it's very word of mouth. So makers talk to other makers and suggest that they get involved. And then before you know it, you've got a core group of makers that will help you.
Yeah. I also tend to, I like join in on other people's conversations on Twitter and say, oh, that looks great. Have you ever thought about having it in a library space? And, you know, so, oh, no, I haven't, you know, have you got a space yet? You know, and if you say, and it's free, you know, bang, you've got a message in your inbox straight away. I'm quite interested in that. Can we have a chat about it?
Yeah, I think it's important that you participate in the community. And I think this is where a lot of people fall short. They put out, we know other people who try to run these things, who put out a call and ask for people to come and then don't speak to them for a year after. If they come, I think the reason this has succeeded and has stayed for these 4 years is that outside of MakeFest, we're all intimately involved in the maker community, in attending their events, supporting their events, promoting their events, and in return they do the same for us. So become part of that community. And this takes a lot of effort to begin with, and you've got to be very, very proactive at the start to set up your network of links. Once it's set, it tends to run itself, but don't underestimate the effort that's required and the drive by maybe 1, 2, 3 individuals to pursue that. This is not something that you can leave on a back burner to run itself. You need people getting out. In that first year, you really do have to be getting out there and actively involved, and have, if it's you doing it on your own, find a chum. It's a lot of work to do.
So do you want to go to the next slide, Ethan?
Yeah.
So you're going to have this moment. This is one of the examples. We just thought we'd put this up because it's quite nice, of, you know, the amount of kids that come in. So these are robots and collections of things that go on at MakeFest.
Yeah, and I guess the reason this slide is here is that when you start putting a call out for makers, they'll start coming back to you and saying, well, could we do this? And we say, well, what does that look like? And they'll send you a picture, and it's like, that's very cool.
Yeah.
A good tip in the first year that you're running it is say yes to everybody.
Say yes to everything. And
say yes to everything.
Then work it out later.
And then work it out later, all right? At some point, you need to cut off we're full, but say yes to everybody. Have more people as backups as well. In the first instance, don't turn anybody away. Not that first time that you run it. You can be more selective down the line, but everything, and say yes to everybody. Next slide, Ethan.
So when we do MakeFest, as I said, we went out and we were makers anyway, so we had a community to hand. But Denise had to come in and get quite involved in that community, and now she's instrumental, you know, 4 years later. So it's one of those. Now you wouldn't say Denise I think Denise thinks she's a librarian, but we'd say she's like a maker librarian. You know, so she puts librarian at the front, but we'd probably say, well, no, by now you're a maker. But I think in that first instance, going to the communities and saying to them, what kind of things do you do? Could you just come in just one day a year and come talk? And would you like to run this event? It's very good for makers to get involved in this, because libraries give us a platform for a community. It gives us a platform where everybody's inclusive, everybody's equal. And also there's lots and lots of makers who are doing amazing stuff that have not necessarily in their communities anywhere to showcase what they do.
Yeah, they can't reach. They
They
haven't got
can't
that
reach. So if they want to show, we're doing this amazing stuff, you know, with, you know, like Ross's books this year were amazing digital books, and we'll show you a bit more about that later. You know, they're an amazing project, but there wouldn't be a showcase for that. So the makers will get a lot out of this as well as you get a lot.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because one of the reasons we put this together was we were very mindful that there were loads and loads of people doing very, very cool stuff, but they're very disparate, very dispersed all over the place. And they really didn't have one place they could come to share it. So it's as much for the makers to kind of get in touch with other makers and see what they're doing as it is for the public as well. And I think to make it a success, you need to have that vibe where everybody gets something out of it, and everybody.
And also, as well, it's not just about science. It can basically cover any subject. So it can fit in with a host of events that you're doing, that you can have this kind of elements happening, and you will find a person who is actually working on that. So it can be reading, it can be literacy, it can be history, it can be local history, it can be anything.
So once we're at, this is where we're up to at the moment. So you have this crazy idea, we're going to go for it, and that's the first step. You work out your tables, and then it's like, okay, we can fit this number in, and then you start getting involved in the community and putting those calls out for things, and you'll find things start coming back. At that point, you've got something you can put online. So at that point was when we set up a web page and our social media accounts, and then started tweeting out and putting on the web page which makers we were having. We did that as a rolling program. So you don't wait until it's full to announce it.
You start announcing.
Announcing people as they come along. So we've got these people and these people and these people, and you put a little bio up and links to their social media, and the conversation.
Bit about the maker that's coming, what kind of things they're doing, what kind of things they'll showcase at the library, and that kind of makes that a bit more of a rolling program. Our page at Liverpool MakeFest, you know, if you Google it, you can go see it. You can see pretty much how ours is set up. Now, our page now is very beautifully slick now. But when we first started it, it did quite look like an average, you know, WordPress page that said Liverpool MakeFest on it, that had a little bit about the day and had very much a picture of people who were coming, bios, and what they were doing.
This is another important point, and that is in this first year when you set these things up, you end up doing everything yourself. So we set up the webpage with a WordPress account in the first instance, a free WordPress. We set up the Twitter. We were all doing the tweeting. We were all doing the emails to makers. We were all going in, joining in with the maker community. So that first year, it'll be you doing it. Probably.
But keep in mind, you won't be doing it on your own. You'll find key makers in the community that will help you. As says, you know,
and also will help you with the web page and with your designs and things. Other people will actually do it for you.
You don't need to hire in people to do any of these things. So let's just tell you now, we did all. It's possible to do this all yourself, and it's pretty good. But eventually, you'll need to delegate as it grows. But maybe next time.
One of the things I did give Ethan was to basically decide on logos, posters and banners, things that you want to get out there. So one of the things I gave to Ethan earlier on was a dropbox with some of the things that we put together in the first year to make it a little easier for you guys. So we put together in the first year things like our risk assessment forms for our library. And we put together things like our logo for our library. And we put together things like our call to makers, how we worded it, and things like our emails to makers to say, you know, this is what you're doing. Can you fill out this form? Can you tell us a bit more about yourself? What kind of project do you want to do? So I've put that all in a Dropbox for Ethan so that you don't have to. So you don't have to draft these things. You don't have to work them out. You can go and grab it, and I'm sure Ethan will find somewhere to put all the stuff for it. So you don't have to write those things this year. But you can decide on a logo yourself, Or, like it was in our first year, we actually put a call out to all our digital startups in our communities and said to them, somebody design us a logo?
And so what we ended up with was, if you look at that MakeFest banner there, which we made ourselves, right at the very end after the word MakeFest is a light bulb with a cog in it. And that was our very first logo that was designed by, I think, Voda. Designed that for us. And I think that's also in the Dropbox.
It is.
So if you want to use that and just change the name of your library, we're happy with that. It's all open source. You can do that.
We also put in there our first leaflets. I mean, later on we found that leaflets weren't something, as Liverpool MakeFest gained more of a reputation, we didn't so much need leaflets. But in the initial first year, we felt like we did, just to explain what was going on in the library. So there's a plan for our one there, so you can see that and see how we set ours up. But yet again, that was voluntarily done. We asked a call out for designers. Can you design the library's leaflets? You know, so these are things that we went on social media, we went on Twitter, we went to communities and said, is there anybody who could design us this? And then they went about doing it. So that solves a lot of the kind of promotional logo issues, banners.
Next slide.
Next slide.
I'm just mindful of the time, keep an eye on it. Oh, that's just a mock-up of the very first, one of the very first posters, I think, that we did with the Liverpool MakeFest 2015 light bulb on it. They can be very simple. It's easy to grab images from the net and design your own posters if you want to. We had them printed, I think, in-house, didn't we?
Yeah.
And then literally went around Liverpool sticking them up. So you may have to do a little bit about that.
Well, interestingly as well, with the Makey there as well, thanks to Thomas Isaac's idea, we are thinking about attempting a Guinness World Record about the longest Makey chain.
I think
this year's MakeFest.
Yeah.
We got up to 60, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, I think
we're digressing.
That's a bit of a digress.
Let's
but what
carry
I will
on so
say,
we'll have time for questions.
well,
Okay, next thing. So, things that you need to do to get the makers on board. So, bear in mind that, sorry, I'm taking this over.
No, it's all right. Go on, you're quicker.
So, makers are coming for free. So, they're giving their time for free, and they're setting up for free. Often their resources for free.
And workshops.
And the workshops are free. So, they're coming in and doing all this thing for free. So, you need to look after them. And this is very, very important. You need to make them feel that they're wanted. And there's a number of easy ways to do that. Number one, don't charge them to set up a stand. All right, don't charge them to set up a stand. Feed them.
Yeah.
Okay. So two of the major costs of a MakeFest are hiring the trestle tables.
Yeah.
And providing food for makers. In the first year, we did this, pizzas. Okay, and they loved it. So feed your makers. They're there for the whole day. It's exhausting. Make sure that they are fed. When you're trying to think about how you're going to do this, build in this idea of actually feeding the makers. Next slide, I think.
And for costs, I mean, the tables come in at less than £4 a table.
They do. Next thing is make them badges, okay, so that they are recognised as makers or crew or whatever.
Yeah, there's one of those things with MakeFest or MakeFest, they all kind of get a badge. Now, this is the kind of thing you can ask your makers to do. When you get a few makers that are interested in helping you running this, you say to them, can we get some badges? Quite often, makers all have access to laser cutters. So these badges were designed by Jennifer Fenner, one of our makers who's now runs ours as a director. And she designed those amazing badges each year where she just put them out and then you put them on. We get very proud. It's the pride thing to have at a maker.
Yeah, it's like the minimalist goodie bag.
Yeah.
It's like food and the maker badge.
Yeah, that's what you need.
That's what you need. So make sure that you have badges for the next slide. Thank you. Publicity. Okay, it's not just about Denise. It's kind of like laughing here. It's not just about social media. Don't underestimate the power of your social media. Twitter, in particular, in promoting this. The likes of LinkedIn is a bit hidden. The likes of Facebook's a bit. Twitter is probably the best social media platform for promoting. A lot of them hang out on there, and it has a big reach, and you can get out to people very quickly. But speak to your local radio stations, speak to your local newspapers, we've got the Echoes, speak to your local TV companies, say we're running this event, can we talk to you about it, either on the day or beforehand or after the event. All of these are kind of like little things that we've done to promote, speak to people.
And there's key words as well. If you actually mention things like robots, Daleks,
Daleks.
3D printing.
Yeah. Also, think about when, one of the things we haven't touched on, guys, is think about when you're running the
Oh,
MakeFest.
important. Yes.
Really important. We run our MakeFest at the end of June, and it was very much pitched because I wanted lots of young kids to be able to access it. So it's pitched just before they break up for the school holidays.
But it's after the exams.
After the exams.
Yeah.
So if you pitch your MakeFest, pitch it in school breaks.
Pitch it in school breaks. The other important thing is that if you run it, initially run it for one day.
Yes.
All right, we know a few people are trying to run it for two.
It's too much.
So when you run it for a day, run it at a weekend, run it on a Saturday. The reason we run it on a Saturday and not also on a Sunday or just on a Sunday is makers have day jobs. They have to go to work on a Monday. And it's an exhausting process to be stood up doing things all day. They need a day to recover. So stick it on a Saturday, run them on Saturdays, give them a break, and then let them go back to work on Mondays. Next slide.
Next slide. So this is our first community. So these were the people that were involved in our first MakeFest. After we went out and we reached out to the community, we ended up with the core community that was about 20 key makers within our community. And we put together a board for advising the three founders of MakeFest on how to run it.
Yeah, so this initial slide was, it sounds like it's just the three of us did it. We didn't. We kickstarted it off, we got the ball rolling, we set up the website, and then it's like, can people help? And these are all the people who ended up helping, either as curators or as front of house. So we had Steampunks do our front of house stuff every year now, great community of people.
Great community to help you.
And the other people on there were involved in being in charge or curating, in the first year we did it, different floors within the library with walkie-talkies and the like, and organising the crew and volunteers that direct people, that make sure the makers get their food, that make sure they have the power requirements that they need, all of those kind of things. So you need bodies on the floor on the day, and they're all volunteers to curate that. And that's our kind of first team, plus our Dalek. It was a bit of a crowd pleaser on the day. So next slide. Oh, before you go on to the next slide, see that, if we can just quickly go back, sorry, then see that massive banner that says Liverpool MakeFest? Each of those things is about 1 metre high. We built those by hand. Laminated by hand and then strung them up with sheets of bamboo and string. So the first year, be prepared to make a lot of stuff.
And to be honest, there's some street cred in making it. With
there
is.
Makers. The makers do like the fact it's home done.
Yes.
DIY. Next slide.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Talking on steampunks, some of the communities, not just tech, and not just pictures. So artists that are a great one to go to, steampunks are a great community to tap to. They do a whole bunch of our creation and they do a whole bunch of coming in and running our event as volunteers on the day. Yeah. So they're a great community.
So think arts, crafts, pottery, anything that involves hands-on making of things of any variety, not just tech, is you want to have at your MakeFest. You don't want it just to become a tech shop. Yeah. The other thing is, it's not just about pitches. I mean, you may have given the impression it's about people setting up stall at trestle tables. It's not. So if we go to the next slide,
you can probably see it.
You can probably see it a little bit better there. So an integral part is to run workshops.
Yeah.
It's not just a show and tell. There's an element of that. And some of the workshops take place at the trestle tables, hands-on making of pom-poms or pottery or magic wands or robots or whatever, but also set up workshops. This is one of our Code a Drone workshops from last year where people, kids, as you can see in the background, learn to code drones. Now, there are a number of ways in which you can do this. We found in the first year that we tried to schedule everything in and have fixed time slots for workshops.
It kind of was tough.
It was very tough because it meant that a lot of people were on the go all day with very little breaks. What we now tend to do is run things more in a drop-in kind of way with gaps in the day. So makers can go around and see what else is there and also grab a kind of a lunch break.
And eat.
Yeah, so drop-ins with a rolling program rather than fixed book-inable 1 to 2 hour workshops probably works better.
Yeah. And sometimes you can have it where you have a maker do a workshop at the beginning of the day from like 9 till 1, and then they don't do that workshop, and then they do something else in the afternoon. So, yes, Ethan, I am rushing ahead.
Right. So
I'll do this.
Let's just go through
Let's
it.
belt on.
Okay, so
our first attempt ended up with these makers. So they were the kind of first attempt that we did. So that was the amount that we got through the first time. So if you want to just
skip ahead. So that's kind of, this is all on the website. You can check that out. So next slide. I'll rush through this. So in the first year, we decided to zone it. So each floor of the library had a different kind of zone. It was themed around particular areas. Since then, we've decided a more eclectic mix to jumble people up. So different kinds of people.
It's a good way to start.
Good way to start, theme it.
So you can skip through these.
Zone A was all our robots. These are our robot makers. Next slide. This was on the ground floor. Zone B was on the first floor of the library. We set up a business hub with startups, IoT and the web. These are a few of the makers there. So next slide, give people time for questions. Zone C was on the ground floor. That was all our crafters. So woodwork and jewellery and pearl and pottery and all of those kind of things, all the crafters together. Next slide. Zone D was all our wearable tech and drones, education, virtual reality. So they're all together, 3D printing, robotics, laser cutting, virtual reality, all of those things, wearable stuff. Next slide. Zone E was our kind of crowd puller inner. So we had
we had a lot of like science fiction stuff.
Yeah,
I've always had the fantasy elements too.
Yes, always have that at MakeFest. So always think science fiction meets science fact. Have some sexy looking stuff in the front of house. So we had Doctor Who stuff and Daleks and robotics and big stuff like that to pull people into the library. Next slide. We're rushing through this next, I'm mindful of time. And on the top floor, we had our music bits and all our workshops. Most of our workshops tend to be there. Underwater robots to all kinds of stuff to do with coding and making things and making music. Next slide.
I think, are we out?
And finally, we had a game hub for coding with Minecraft, Geocraft, Raspberry Pi. Again, zones, so people could spend time in different kind of zones. Next slide.
I think maybe we've got through the zones.
Right, okay, so...
This can stay now because this is kind of round about
this is where we're finished.
So we zoned ours the first year because it made it easy for us to kind of manage it. And also it made it easy for us to give it over to creation. So if we had this moment where we had people who were specialists and we found them at like Carl Sims at Edge Hill, who's a real specialist in the game hub, we'd hand over that bit and say, can you put that bit together for us?
Yeah.
So that made it a little easier. Nowadays, we tend to have quite a big team that does that.
So after you've done all that, and we'll shut up in a second so you can actually ask some questions, there will be spin-offs from it. So the other important reason for running MakeFest is that it can generate a lot of interest that allows libraries to set up things like Young MakeFest, to make a difference project that runs all year, and Liverpool Co-Club in Liverpool runs all year.
And I think that's probably what Denise probably wants to just have a quick chat about.
Well, these are just all basically library spin-offs. I mean, on the back of this, we had approaches from basically makers who wanted to do other things, including a coding club, and I was able to spin off and apply for the Opportunities Fund money for Make a Difference.
Cool. So should we take some questions? Sorry, Ethan, we ramble on.
No, it's quite all right. Really glad you had a lot of information.
Sorry.
Course of how to do this.
Yeah, let's take questions. Let's take questions.
But yes, if there are questions out there, I have muted everybody's line, so just so people are aware of that. And people can also use the chat. But if to get questions started, I guess it's, what if you work in a small library?
That's fine.
Okay, then you run a small MakeFest. All right, so start at the same place. How many tables can you fit in? You can always, if it's very small, and small might be, I don't know, 10, 15 tables, let's say, arbitrarily, call it a mini MakeFest.
Yes. Mini MakeFest is a good way to call it. You can have a little one, or you can run like
a young MakeFest.
Or a young MakeFest.
That's aimed at primary age.
Yeah.
Yeah. Size doesn't matter.
I think it's mostly about having your community, really, isn't it?
Yeah. What do they cost initially? Where do
right. Okay. On funding.
Okay. So initially, first year, Rosie, it cost us 850 quid. 350 of that came out of our own pockets. We got a 500 grant from Awesome Liverpool for the rest. The vast majority of that was hiring the tables, buying the food, the rest of it we made ourselves. So you can do it cheaply. Since then, we've got more funding. Denise?
And it depends how big your MakeFest is or how big your library is. I've included in the stuff that I gave to Ethan the first set of slides when we went to go to funding for Awesome, so that people can, if they're trying to get funding or they want to raise funding from their community, they can use our slides. You know, if you want to explain what a MakeFest looks like when you're trying to run it, use our images, use our stuff. Use any of our stuff to try and get yourself funding to do that. And go to your community of makers, ask them to help you from
Yeah, to give you a quick idea very quickly, in the first year, so the 850 quid, we had about 100 stores, didn't we?
Yeah,
100
and that's a big
stands.
MakeFest.
And that's a
That's
big
a big
MakeFest. So if you scale that down, if you have half that number, then you
Yeah.
can bring it down to like 400, or if you have less than that,
Yeah.
so you can do the maths.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
you know, branch library 200
So,
maybe.
Yeah,
About a tenner a pitch, give or take,
I think that's probably more expensive actually
Yeah.
than it needs to be. But
Yeah.
yeah,
something like that.
Anybody
Got
else,
more
Ethan?
chat? I don't know. Hang on, let's have a look.
Brilliant.
Just getting our chat up. Initial cost, yeah. So does that answer the question about where the funding came from? Own pockets and a little bit of a grant.
although you know that key investment that we did in the first instance, you know, did lead later on to mass investment then from
What's the
the
fund this
Arts
year?
Council.
We've got 15,000, but that's also got a side project about a horse parade as well, a digital horse parade.
So you might need to initially pump prime it, but thereafter it gives you a vehicle for putting in for larger pots of money because you made it a success on the cheap. And as Denise just said, it's now kind of like got a £15,000 pot for this year and other bits of things.
Things that we're doing.
Okay.
So I have another question
Yes.
regarding volunteers helping at the MakeFest. Do you follow your normal procedures for volunteering in the library, i.e. references, having a contact number in case of emergency, etc.?
No,
We don't.
we just ask friends and friends of makers and makers who know people do they want to get involved,
But
and they all
what
say
we
yes.
do is we do get them together to talk to Denise at the library to discuss exactly what we want them to do, and then we label them with our maker badges. So one of the things that you do for the actual, you know, the badge part is quite important because it categorises who is a maker and who is crew. And crew is the people that Denise can direct. She can say where she wants them to go, what she wants them to do, and they just take care of the makers on the day.
And they tend to do all of the sort of front of house.
They also tend to do things like move our tables on the night, you know, move all your
Help
tables
us
into
set up,
place,
yeah.
help us set up. So they're not necessarily there for the public's domain. They're there to make sure that the running of MakeFest goes
Yeah,
smoothly.
that's an important thing. Who does all this? And you'll be under different kind of constraints. You know, we do most of the humping around ourselves with our volunteers. So the tables arrive the night before. We move them all into place, set up all the cables, do all that, do all the pack testing if it's needed. And there are certain things we can't move in Denise's library. They have to have, who are the guys that do that?
It's the building.
The building people have to
So you
do
have to work
some,
that
so you
out.
need to work out whether you're allowed to move tables or whether people within your library have to move furniture for you.
And is it a listed building? What constraints for your library? You know, our library is a listed building, so there's certain, you can't put things up on the walls,
Yes.
you know, for a start. So, you know, there's certain constraints of that. And also, I think we touched briefly on them, things like pack testing. You know, ask all of your makers to make sure everything's pack tested before it arrives, you know, so that you don't have to worry about that. And also things like getting power to all your makers. When you do, we do them with extension cables, and we pack test our extension cables so that
And take
that's
them all down.
take them all down and then tape everything down so it's nice and safe. You've got to make sure that you look at all those safety requirements, but your building people tend to help us a lot with that.
We'll advise you on that.
And they
anyway.
advise us.
And check your Wi-Fi. When you ask
yeah.
makers, ask, and on the forms I think Kaz has put in the Dropbox, it sort of says a whole bunch of questions to ask
you
them,
need
included,
Wi-Fi?
do you need Wi-Fi? You know, do you have special dietary needs for the food? Do your stuff, anything needs pack testing? All that's in the Dropbox.
Mhm.
Yep.
Brilliant. There's a follow-on question from that.
Yeah.
How does risk assessment work? Is it one for each activity or for the whole day?
It's
And do you have those and would you share them?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes.
Yes.
So we ask everyone to do an individual one. We find there's no awful lot of overlap between the different kinds of things people are bringing in. So once we got the individual ones in, we compile that into an overall master risk assessment.
That I've
It covered
included.
all the activities that you're likely to get in MakeFest, which is in the Dropbox.
Yep, so basically you can send it to a maker and go, fill that in for us, and then you can see yourself exactly where you need to make sure they're risk assessed.
Yep.
Mhm.
Brilliant. Thank you. And are there other questions?
I don't know, I'm hoping. That's a lot really to cover. They're probably stood there thinking, God.
There it is.
You know, I have tried to include, as I said, Ethan, you know, as much documentation as I physically could in the first instance that we did, so that it saves you time. you know, because a lot of our documentation was built bespoke when we first started this. So, you know, for you guys to run your own MakeFest, there's plenty of documentation I've included that will save you a whole bunch of time.
Yeah, you can use anything in the Dropbox, and you can tap us up about anything, because we may have documents that can help you.
Yeah.
Don't reinvent the wheel, people. Use what's there.
Use what's there. And also we have been going around and advising certain libraries if they wanted to speak to us. Mark's done a few now where he's gone up to a library and gone, right, you want to run one, let's talk about how you go about it, to glance around your library and see maybe this and maybe that.
Cruise just actually got funding for theirs in October. I don't know if Tom's on this or not. And there's other ones who are just planning now.
Yeah. Okay.
Brilliant. With regard to the Dropbox, are you okay if I take that information and put it into the Basecamp, so that way it's easier for people to access?
I was like, here's the stuff. Go find a home for it.
Yeah.
I will do that.
If I find any more as I go along that I think it'd be you know, useful, I'll send them across to you.
Well, also, if people say, do you have one of these, or do you have something like this, just ask us, and if we've got it, we'll stick it over to you and people can have it. The whole point about doing this is to try and share it amongst libraries. It's all open source.
Yeah.
So we can save people time in setting it up. That's fine.
Yeah, we didn't want this as any kind of ownership. So what we want to do is
Rosie, I
make it
can share it on Basecamp.
Yeah.
We'll get it Innovation Network. Yeah.
Things, all our documentation, our first logos, everything we can give you. And as I said, when you do, you know, you can find Liverpool MakeFest page. You go into gallery and click on there. There's a whole host of images on there. When you want to talk about funding, about what you want to do in your library, grab the images, use them. You know, talk about it, because it's quite hard to explain what a MakeFest is unless you've run one. Well, you know, the library has a perfect model of having run one in Liverpool, quite feel free to direct people to MakeFest. If people don't get what you're trying to do, direct them to our website. And as Kat says, if you want to take any images from there to help,
anything off me, if you want to use,
take it all.
Make a difference, you're welcome to.
Yeah. So any help we can give any other library to make sure that they run their own MakeFest and build their own community that way, we're more than willing to.
Yeah.
So, any more questions, or are we good? Or has anybody got any interesting ones?
Just wait and see. It takes people a minute or two.
Our next one.
30th of June, Ben.
30th of June, Ben. Yeah.
Yeah, we've actually got a whole week's worth of lead up this year from the 23rd. There's a big horse parade with
There's a horse
puppet on a digital horse, and then there's some workshops that week, and then it's the actual MakeFest is on the 30th.
And a gig.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and a gig by Professor Elemental, who's a steampunk rapper. So yeah, that should be interesting.
How did you manage to have a non-council website? Well, the makers work in consultation with our library, so we set up our own WordPress, and makers run it, makers organise it.
Yeah,
so,
this is not a council-run event. This is a bunch of anything but. The library is.
Yeah, you have to look at it as MakeFest is a partner, and a partner's got its own website.
Yes. So, and it helps a lot, especially when you're bidding against. To some extent, because then it gives you a community to represent.
Yeah.
You know, because then Denise can say when she's putting in things that she wants to do, we'll be working with the community. So when you find the makers, you say to them, can you organise a separate, MakeFest website, but there's no reason that libraries couldn't take a different model and have their own.
You could. I think you'd find the inertia in that particular system, having to jump through council hoops between you and me, pretty tricky. Set it up as an independent thing, as a collaboration.
And we can actually put posters on our front page, but that's about it really. So we'd actually tweet and then retweet things from MakeFest
across
Twitter, of course.
Should we have a quick nose and see if there's any other questions there? But yeah, I'd leave that particular one with the websites. Talk with your makers when you get them.
How do you manage to have that? Thank you.
Okay, welcome.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that got them. Anyone else?
if anybody thinks of anything else afterwards, just drop me a line or, you know, put it on the Innovation Network and I'll pick it up anyway.
Yeah, and we do have at the front of this talk, there's, oh, thank you, Ben, I'm glad that was useful. On the front of this talk is all our Twitter handles, because we're all terrible.
Yeah, get hold. I mean, the quickest way to get hold of us and to follow up on this, if you want to, is probably through our individual Twitters. To be honest, and then we can direct you towards some of the other websites. We haven't even mentioned the Society of Library Makerspaces websites. We can hook you up to Makers We Know and to Twitter pages that collate this kind of thing and conferences and stuff. So Twitter's a good one to start with.
We started to, you know, it might be worth touching on that before we go. You know, we recognise very quickly, we recognised that between the three of us, we represented three different parts, which was schools, HE and libraries. So Denise set up the Society of the Library Makerspaces, which has been collating all the libraries. And I've done schools and Mark did HE. So between us, we do have a good grasp on all the makers that we know nationwide. So we can go, if you are in a library and you're saying, I want to do this, you can tell us where we are and we can go out on Twitter, you need to speak to such and such and such and such, you know, and say, that's how it is.
Yeah.
So is that anything else anybody wants to add, or is that okay, Ethan?
It looks like there's a lot of thank yous, but nothing else. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all your work on this.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. You know, we just really want other libraries, take it up, make it your own. You know, you don't have to use our logos or our stuff, use your own. All we want really is other libraries to have their own MakeFest. You know, it's really crucial that we have libraries, you know, having this kind of impact in the country. You know, it's an incredible thing that we've done here at Liverpool Libraries to do this. So it should be really nationwide.
Cool.
Brilliant. Well, maybe I'll see you on the 30th of June. That's quite exciting.
Everybody come up. It's a great day, and we've got some fantastic things
this year.
We'll give you pizza.
Pizza.
Awesome. I could bring a maker if you wanted.
And a badge. A librarian badge.
This year, we'll find some librarian badges.
Oh,
that'd be awesome. We'll get some librarian badges. That'd be cool.
Make a library.
Make a librarian.
A bit long, man.
Okay, so.
But yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
And give us the promo stuff for the 30th of June.
Yes,
we will do. Thank you, Ethan.
Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you all.
Take care.
I will do on Basecamp. Everybody, don't worry.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.